Hello, everybody who's currently joining us. Just want to let you know that we're going to begin in just a few minutes, and I would invite you to just put your name into the chat in the meantime, and one thing that you hope for our children's future. Okay, so I know there's going to be people joining us, and that's great. And I just want to kick us off. So I want to say hello and welcome to everyone. Thanks to you who have already joined us today. It's wonderful to see so many of us gathering in support of children's climate rights. It's really uplifting to me. This has been, I think, needless to say, a challenging moment for a lot of us as we've reflected over what's been happening in the United States over the last couple of weeks. But we really believe here at our Children's Trust that community and connection is the answer. So, in service of that, I would love for all of you to take a moment to share your name in the chat and just share one thing that you hope for our future, for the future of children, and for the future of this planet. So, my name is Matt Dos Santos. I'm co-executive director of Our Children's Trust. And 5 years ago, I joined our Children's Trust after being the legal director at the ACLU of Oregon, where I fought Trump tirelessly every day of the week. And I believed then, as much and maybe even more so now, that the work that our Children's Trust is doing is on the forefront. It's truly revolutionary legal work. And it's so important today. We're fighting for the rights of historically oppressed children. That's always been a passion of mine. But I know that those rights mean nothing if they don't have clean air, safe water, and a thriving planet to call home. So thank you for joining us. And I'd like to turn it over to Julia Olson, my co-executive director and the visionary founder of Our Children's Trust. Julia's leadership has been a cornerstone in the climate rights movement. So welcome, Julia.
Thank you, Matt. That's very kind. Hi, everyone. I wish I could see your faces, but it's fun seeing some of the names pop in. So thank you so much for being here. And as Matt said, it's a really good and important time to come together in community with one another and start looking to the future. And during these uncertain times, with the setbacks that we've seen to climate action, some of which we don't even know how significant they will be with the results of the election, we wanted to start just by grounding everyone in our power, in our resilient capacity to keep going and do more, and remind all of you what we have already accomplished with so many of your voices and investment in this work. So as a reminder, and for those who are new, I founded Our Children's Trust 15 years ago. And I did it with some incredible women who you're going to hear from today. Andrea Rogers was with us from the beginning. Kelly Matheson was with us from the beginning. And many of you were with us from the beginning. And at that time, in 2010, there was no court on the planet that had recognized climate rights and said that climate rights are human rights. Climate change was considered an environmental issue, not a human rights issue, and certainly not a children's rights issue. Today, we see a global youth-led climate rights movement, and courts around the world are recognizing those rights. And everyone from pediatricians to economists are fighting for those climate rights for children. So in 2023 was a huge moment. As you know, we won the first constitutional climate trial in the state of Montana in US history, and that's a red state. And then in 2024, we won the first settlement agreement of a constitutional climate case in a blue state. As a result, the state of Hawaii will become the first state in the nation to get to a zero emissions transportation system by 2045 and offer the entire world and every government and every jurisdiction a holistic model of how to do that. This work is hard. Our team works incredibly hard. I can't describe for you how hard our team works. And we are winning as a result of that hard work. And we're going to keep winning children's fundamental rights. And here's the other thing that I want you to remember in times like this. Our constitutional democracies, they were built precisely for these moments. And our children's trust was built precisely for these moments. It's why we have courts. They are there to protect and defend our rights when political and moneyed interests would threaten them. And we are ready for what's to come. We're excited. Like in 2016, I was depressed. I am fired up right now, and I am looking forward to be on offense in the next 4 years and having you with us. And our young people need us now more than ever. So let's talk about how we're moving forward in 2025. And back to you.
Thanks, Julia. And I couldn't agree with you more. Our children need us today more than they ever have. And it's more important than ever that we secure state level constitutional protections of fundamental climate rights. And as Julia shared, we've had tremendous victories in Montana and Hawaii, and we're going to be building on those victories as we move forward, both in the states that we are already litigating in, like Utah, Virginia, and Alaska. And we're going to be expanding into new states across the country. That's why we need your support right now. That's why support is so critical in an ongoing way. And this is all in service of our groundbreaking federal strategy, where we are taking a state by state action in support of that to reach a federal tipping point. And while I'd like to take credit for that legal theory, we're really building on lessons that we've learned from civil rights movements of the past. Civil rights movements like desegregation, leading to Brown v. Board of Education, and the civil rights movements of marriage equality, with Obergefell. These courageous lawyers and organizations went both at state levels protections while going and fighting at the federal courts in concert to reach a federal tipping point. And so we're going to be asking you to support us in all of our states, state actions, and with some incredible federal strategy that we'll be hearing from Julia on. One of the additional things that we're going to be doing in the states is supporting state level ballot initiatives to secure what most people think of as green amendments, but those are the explicit constitutional protections to a stable, livable climate. We've seen how those explicit constitutional rights have served us in our Montana and Hawaii cases. And so we'll be partnering with advocacy groups at state levels to move ballot initiatives either through the legislature or through, a signature petition to enshrine constitutional rights at the state level. So, before we dive into Montana and Hawaii, I just want to say one thing about one of our current cases, which is the Alaska case. That case is, it's almost a perfect example of the work that we've done over the last, more than a decade, where we started by filing an action in 2011, have subsequently filed cases, and are now back before the court with the strongest case we've ever had. We're trying to fight an 800-mile liquid natural gas pipeline on behalf of eight Alaskan youth, many of whom are Alaskan natives. That 800-mile pipeline is a carbon bomb. It would triple Alaska's emissions in the coming decades, and we must stop it. So, um, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to build on our victory in Montana. As many of you know, this past July, we defended our historic win in the Montana Supreme Court. That win is, the state has basically challenged us as at every turn. Instead of cooperating with us, they have fought Montana's youth at every possible moment. But we really believe that justice will prevail in Montana. And in fact, we expect to hear from the Montana Supreme Court any day now, maybe even as early as next Tuesday. That win is critical. It'll solidify that the state of Montana can't just continue to perpetuate fossil fuel driven energy policy because it has now been declared unconstitutional under Montana's own constitution. And so I just want you to think about that for a moment. Montana's going to have to factor in children's constitutional rights every single time they consider permitting fossil fuel projects. Judge Kathy Seeley, in her groundbreaking decision, she made it clear that Montana is already unconstitutionally degraded, and every additional ton of greenhouse gases emitted further injures young Montanans. And this isn't just an abstract idea, right? This is harm that's happening now to young people. And the court recognized it after we put all of the evidence on trial and young people took the stand. We think that this new legal precedent will be Montana's strongest, most powerful tool to stop new fossil fuel projects and to protect its lands, air, and water for generations of children to come. But as you can imagine, especially in a red state like Montana, these victories don't just sustain themselves. A win in this court is only the beginning. And we are going to need all of you behind us to ensure that these rights are upheld and enforced. So, what are we doing in 2025 to make sure that Montana keeps winning? We're going to be empowering young Montanans. We'll work with educators across the state to ensure that every child knows that they have a constitutional right to a livable climate. And just imagine that ripple effect of a new generation coming up, understanding that they have this constitutional right. That is power. We're going to be building local partnerships where we will partner closely with community leaders that have been in this fight in Montana for decades and decades, building grassroots power across the entire state. And together we'll make sure that this victory is enshrined in Montana's history books. And of course, we're going to be defending plaintiffs' rights. We're going to be defending the rights of young people. We'll ensure that these newly recognized rights are not just protected, but enforced at every step of the way. We, I mean, it's hard for me to talk about it without getting choked up, but the bravery and the determination of these young people are an inspiration for us to push forward, no matter how red the state and how steep the climb. But all of this, defending victories, empowering communities, and building sustainable future requires resources, dedication, and unwavering commitment. So that's why your support is so critical today. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, who's going to talk to you a little bit about our incredible victory in Hawaii this year.
Thank you so much, Matt. So appreciate everyone joining us today. I really look forward to hearing all of your stories as well, because we really could not do any of this work without your support. And I appreciate Julia sharing a bit more about OCT's origin story, as our case in Hawaii, like Alaska, is a good example of how we learn from and build off of our prior efforts as part of our strategic litigation campaign. So back in 2011, on Mother's Day, Hawaii was one of the states where we supported a group of youth filing a petition for rulemaking, asking the state to cap and regulate carbon dioxide emissions. And at that time, the regulators patted the kids on the heads and said, "Yeah, not today, maybe another day." So since that time, we were working in the state with communities, with youth, and coming up with a new case theory so that we could successfully represent young people in Hawaii. And during that time, a lot of things happened at the Supreme Court. Some justices heard of a little case called Juliana versus United States, and the Hawaii Supreme Court justices were inspired to recognize the right to a life-sustaining climate system under its state constitution. We framed our case in Hawaii as a challenge to the state's transportation system, because although the state had done a lot of work setting strong legislative greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, the Department of Transportation was not following through, and transportation emissions were expected to make up the vast majority of the state's climate pollution through 2035. We represent 13 incredible youth plaintiffs from across the islands, many of whom are Native Hawaiian and experiencing an incredible array of climate change impacts, including one youth who lost 2 homes, including one in the Lahaina wildfire. After 2 years of very hard-fought litigation, this past June, we secured a first-of-its-kind settlement agreement where all 3 branches of government are working together for the first time towards zero emissions in the transportation system by 2045. I know a settlement agreement doesn't sound as exciting as a trial ruling, but let me tell you, this remedy is incredible and it's game-changing in many ways. This is the first time that all 3 branches of the government will be working with young people and held accountable by the courts to make sure that the state achieves zero emissions in ground transportation as quickly as possible. And we know very well that our wins in court are only as powerful as their ability to be implemented on the ground. So we've really transitioned our work in Hawaii so that we're focusing on implementing the settlement agreement. We are working closely with the Hawaii Department of Transportation to make sure the settlement agreement terms are effectively implemented. I was very pleased to learn at our last meeting with them that as the staff folks are implementing the agreement, they keep a copy of the settlement agreement open on their computers as they're working on reforming the programming and the budgeting. It's incredible, and I think that goes to show you just how much this settlement shapes how the state is working on climate moving forward. We are working with educators to make sure that every young person across the islands knows that they have a right to a life-sustaining climate system, and they have an ability to hold their leaders accountable to those rights. We'll be active in the legislature this January, making sure the settlement agreement is up in front and center in terms of the climate policy work that they'll be doing. We're building a coalition of community-based partner organizations who are very hungry to support the youth and work towards decarbonizing transportation. And we'll continue to represent the Navahine plaintiffs as they work to implement this remarkable 21-year agreement that the court will be able to enforce. As part of the settlement agreement, we will also be supporting HDOT in launching Hawaii's first Youth Transportation Council, which will meet for the first time on January 3rd. Some of our plaintiffs will be part of that council, and they will be working to advise HDOT on how to implement the transportation policies that will be required under the settlement agreement. We will also be working with the state and our incredible experts who supported us in the litigation on the development of their greenhouse gas reduction plan, which is set to be released in the spring. So I can't tell you enough how important this settlement agreement is for the state of Hawaii and how it really serves as a model for jurisdictions around the world. We have partners in Germany who have looked to the agreement for inspiration in new climate litigation that is being filed there. We are working with partners in other states who'd like to see the same thing happen in different jurisdictions. So we're really excited to make sure that the settlement agreement is really going to be shaping other state governmental climate policies as well. I next want to turn to Florida. So Florida, a very different state politically than Hawaii, as you can imagine. And I'm excited to share that we've just filed a new suit there, again, following and building upon our prior legal efforts there, and following the devastation of the hurricanes Helene and Milton. And this case is against the Florida Public Service Commission. So last summer, July through August of 2023 was the hottest in Florida and Miami-Dade County history since 1985. Miami-Dade County is frequently called ground zero for climate harms in the continental US, with dangerous heat waves, extreme storms, flooding events, even on sunny days, and rising seas. In Florida, the Public Service Commission is the only governmental entity responsible for long-range energy planning and regulation. Every year, the commission reviews what are called 10-year site plans that are prepared by Florida's electric utilities, and they detail energy demand across the state and how the utilities intend to meet it. Since at least 1999, those plans have almost entirely relied on fossil fuels, particularly natural gas, as the state's primary energy source. And the commission simply rubber stamps them every time and says that's okay. And the result of that conduct has been an electricity system that is predominantly fossil fuels, in spite of incredible renewable energy capacity in the state. So in the case of Reynolds versus Florida Public Service Commission, we represent, once again, climate champion Delaney Reynolds and other youth in Miami-Dade County, asserting that the Public Service Commission's conduct of approving these fossil fuel energy plans violates her right to enjoy and defend life guaranteed under Florida's Constitution. Reynolds is asking the court to hold the public service accountable for its job to deliver an electricity system that protects the welfare of Floridians and honors their fundamental rights instead of infringing upon them. It's really clear that young people's lives and future depends on courts in Florida standing up to protect them. We expect the case to be heard in Miami-Dade County towards the beginning of next year, so please look out for that. And with all that is happening right now in the state of Florida, youth there need us standing beside them and advocating for their rights more than ever. So we look forward to your support as we continue to litigate that case on behalf of an amazing group of young people in Florida. And with that, I will turn it back to Julia to talk a little bit more about our federal strategy.
Thanks, Andrea. All right, everyone. I'm going to dig in and give you an update on where Juliana versus the United States stands. I'm going to talk about the twists and turns and the hope in that strategy for that case. Then I'm going to talk about a federal case that some of you may be less familiar with that we've been litigating for the past year. And then I'm going to talk about just the vital work and the creative new theories and ideas that we're coming up with and are going to be implementing over the next 4 years. But before I dive in, I want to do some level setting and talk about the elephant in the federal courtroom, because a lot of people see the worst of what's happening in our federal courts, and you hear the worst of what's coming out of the US Supreme Court. And so there's a lot of talk about why go to the federal courts. Like, this is not a good place for progressive causes or people to be, or climate cases. And so I just want to speak to that for a minute, because I completely disagree with that. And here's why. Our constitutional rights and our court opinions and the way the law develops and the way judges think and the way everything moves in constitutional law is a function of the cases that go before our courts. It's the way they're litigated, it's the way they're decided, and it's the academic jurisprudence, the law review articles, the way law students are learning. All of that is forming how your constitutional rights are being decided. And people like the Koch brothers and strategists at our most conservative legal institutions, they are funding litigation efforts like nobody's business, right? They are out litigating progressive causes and climate cases. And they are bold, they are unafraid, they understand about having a diverse portfolio of litigation and policy actions, and they're outdoing us. And so if we pull back and do less, there's no question they're going to win, because they'll be the voices at the table and our side will always be playing defense. So regardless of how great the Supreme Court is right now, we have to have strategies in play. And so I want to talk, and we have to have a broad portfolio, and we have to be creative, and we have to be as bold and as willing to take risks as the far right legal thinkers in our country are. So with that, I just want to do a quick recap to get us all on the same page. And I forgot to set my timer, so I will need a timer reminder. Sorry, team. So in January of this year with Juliana, we were on the track back to trial. We had pivoted and reworked over a 2-year course of litigation in Judge Ann Aiken's courtroom. We had the green light. We were in her courtroom over Zoom about to get our trial dates. And the Biden Department of Justice said, oh no, we're not going to do a trial on this. We're not going to spend attorney's fees and do this. And so they ran up to the Ninth Circuit on the mandamus petition, their favorite new tool, which, by the way, was a creative, young, conservative lawyer coming up with that strategy. Okay, conservatives said, we're going to start using mandamus. They used it 7 times in the Juliana case. And they did it enough that finally they drew a 3-judge panel at the Ninth Circuit that was a really unfavorable panel. That panel, without even looking at any of Judge Aiken's decisions and orders over the last 2 years, they just told her to dismiss the case. Ignored the law, ignored the Supreme Court. So we get a dismissal and we exhaust all our remedies at the Ninth Circuit because we go under every rock, nook, and cranny looking for a way. So then we're faced with our last recourse is going to the US Supreme Court. And so here's what we did. We said we need every expert and thinker helping us make this decision. So we went, for just some of the names you may recognize, we talked to SCOTUS and constitutional experts at the ACLU. We went to the Center for Reproductive Rights. We went to the NAACP LDF. We went to people like Erwin Chemerinsky, the people who write the constitutional law textbooks. We consulted with private firm experts. I called SCOTUS practitioners. We consulted and vetted with law professors and litigators who work in this space. And we said, here are some of our strategies. What should we do? What's your advice? And across the board, with very few exceptions, everyone said, you should absolutely go for it because the Supreme Court will have many opportunities to do harm to people's rights and the law with or without the Juliana case. And you've worked for 10 years, you have great facts, you have great arguments, and you have a really awful Ninth Circuit decision that will concern even some of the conservative justices. So with all this information, we made a decision and we had a 2-part strategy. The first was, and we did this all with our plaintiffs, so working in tandem with the 21 youth, every one of which is still committed to this case 9.5 years later, which is incredible. So first, we did our own mandamus petition, going on offense with mandamus at the Supreme Court. We knew that was going to get denied, but it was a chance to educate the justices. So that we've gone through that process. Our second phase of the strategy is to petition for cert in December. The twist and turn, and just one thing I should clarify is this petition for cert is just about the right to be in court in a constitutional case. It's the right, for the court to hear the case. And it's about the really abuse of process and procedure that happened in the Ninth Circuit and at the hands of the Department of Justice. So it's not about the merits. We're not going up to determine the merits of the case at this point. So the twist and turn in the case, just briefly, it's complex. I won't go into the details, but I'm happy to talk to anyone, later, is there's a death row inmate in Texas who is addressing the same question that the Juliana plaintiffs are asking, which is, can we get redress from the courts? Do we have standing to be in court? And this case called Gutierrez has been granted cert. It's going to be decided. So we are now working with public defenders on a strategy of what that means for the Juliana plaintiffs. And so you're going to see some exciting new creativity and really an injection of hope into our chances at the US Supreme Court because this topic is on the minds of the justices, and they're going to decide it in at least one, but possibly our case and another case that the fossil fuel industry has brought to the Supreme Court as well. So Juliana is far from dead. But even if Juliana does hit the end of the road at the US Supreme Court, we're only at the end of the line in terms of the Ninth Circuit. So we're looking at bringing the legacy Juliana cases in other circuits as a next step. And we're going to continue pushing forward our new strategy under the Equal Protection Clause, which is the Genesis versus US EPA case that we're currently litigating in a federal court in California. And there, we're at the early stages. We're waiting for a decision and hope to get over the hurdle of getting past a motion to dismiss so that we can also have a green light to head to trial in that case. And that case is about the active way in which our government discriminates against kids through its economic policies. So the US government uses something called a discount rate, and they literally treat children's lives as less valuable than adults. And EPA does this across all of its regulatory programs. And what happens is it makes climate action or limiting pollution look like it's not as beneficial because they're discounting the benefit to kids in doing that. And that's an active violation of the equal protection rights of young people. So we represent 18 amazing children who have not had the right to vote in that case, and we're waiting for a decision and are really hopeful to move that forward. And we have other equal protection case strategies also at play. And then the other thing that I'll just touch on briefly is we have many youth we represent who are people of faith and come from different faiths, whether it's Catholics or Jews or Muslims, indigenous faiths. And we are looking at a First Amendment religious freedom case and the ways in which the government is infringing on people's ability to practice their religions because of what's happening to the planet. So getting really creative, bold, and we will have a federal strategy in play on these different fronts over the next 4 years of the Trump administration and beyond. And the last thing that's really critical in our federal strategy is our friend of the court strategy. So we are starting to submit briefs before the US Supreme Court on important cases that are coming up where children's rights need to be at the forefront. And we need to educate the 4 women on that bench and the other justices about how children's rights are absent from their jurisprudence, and they need to continue to grow it in all areas of law. And so we'll be doing that going forward as well. And I will pause there.
So I want to begin by further emphasizing why our cases, especially Juliana, are globally significant. As Julia shared, in 2016, Juliana marked the very first time a judge declared a right to a climate system capable of sustaining life. This single sentence, along with groundbreaking rulings from the Netherlands and Pakistan, literally transformed climate litigation, and it sparked what is now called the rights turn. To define the rights term, it is just an unprecedented wave of cases that seek to establish and protect climate rights. Juliana also ignited a global movement of youth-led rights-based climate litigation, and today there are nearly 100 cases that are led by young people. So these cases have resulted in courts around the world, from South Korea to Australia to Brazil to Europe's highest human rights court, affirming that climate change represents one of the most serious threats to our rights and well-being. And so I just want to say to all of you that I am deeply honored to be part of an organization and part of this community that has played such a defining role in this global transformation, and just really underscore that it takes every single one of us. So to give you a snapshot of our global work, 2024 was a fun year because it was the year of climate in international courts. There were cases from in the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea to the International Court of Justice. And in these cases, judiciaries worldwide decided or are currently deciding first of the kind cases that will absolutely define our climate rights for generations to come. And we're influencing these processes. So to illustrate, the highest chamber at the European Court of Human Rights decided its first 3 climate cases in 2024. We were granted permission to submit a friend of the court brief in all of these cases, and our submissions provided the court with a very concise summary of the best available science. And we did this to ensure that the judges had robust evidence upon which to base their findings. So here's the twist. Across these cases, 33 countries, 2,500 plaintiffs, and 36 amicus presented evidence. And with the exception of one, and that's Our Children's Trust, every other party advocated that countries be legally permitted to heat the planet to temperatures higher than they are today. This argument was put forth by all these parties despite clear scientific evidence that temperature targets are already too high and that more heating will be more dangerous and violate more rights at just a staggering scale. So when the judgments were released, the beautiful part is the court avoided locking in dangerous temperature targets into law. And instead, they held that these 46 countries across Europe, from the UK to Ukraine, must rely on best available science to guide their actions to address the climate crisis. Our colleagues believe that this unexpected yet very critical outcome resulted from our brief and Judge Seeley's finding in Held versus Montana. At the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, we collaborated with 18 pediatric associations representing nearly 1.5 million medical professionals. And we submitted a brief there that not only outlines the best available science, but it also details the grave injuries children will endure if governments fail to urgently end the use of fossil fuels. And this opinion is expected in early 2025. So next year, I'll give you an example of a couple things we're going to do. Just as we're ensuring that governments comply with court orders in Montana and Hawaii, we're going to actively engage with the Council of Europe to enforce the key judgment out of the European Court of Human Rights. And with our partners in Latin America, we're developing a trio of very bold landmark cases centered on the protection of cultural rights. These cases aim to lock in the anticipated conclusions that are going to come out of the American court, and we want to lock those deeper into law. So there's so much to say, but I'm on the global front, but I'm going to pass to Andrea to share a little bit about our Canadian case.
Thank you, Kelly. And my update is short. We have a case against the federal government of Canada on behalf of these incredible youth plaintiffs who have been going since 2019 and finally last year got a wonderful unanimous ruling from the Federal District Court of Appeals saying that these young people have a right to go to trial to hear their evidence and their claims that the Canadian government is promoting fossil fuels in a way that infringes their charter rights to life, liberty, and security of the person. They have secured trial dates for late 2025, early 2026. And so this trial will happen in Vancouver. So this is another one to put on your to watch list. As the evidence is gathered, the experts are identified, as these young people in La Rose versus His Majesty the King will be able to tell their stories in court and advocate as to why the court needs to declare that they too have a right to a life-sustaining climate system, living in a country that is one of the world's largest producers of fossil fuels. Thanks.
And I just want to take a moment to jump in now and introduce you to Eileen De La Paz, our digital content manager, who will talk to you about the many, many ways that we work to uplift youth voices outside of the court.
Thank you so much, Matt, and thank you all for joining us today. So as we discussed earlier, our work is bigger and made sustainable and durable because of more than what takes place in the courtroom. It starts with our direct engagement with young people, building their own power to secure the fundamental recognition of their rights. And our team works so hard with the youth plaintiffs. We're offering training and capacity building in messaging and public speaking and media engagement. And we give them a platform, not just in the courtroom, but online as well, so they can tell their stories and inspire others. And this includes participating in webinars, in online press conferences, filming videos and introducing themselves on social media. And I'm going to share a few examples of that. So Riley Brooke is a Navajena youth plaintiff in Hawaii, and she did an incredible job participating in a few series of webinars about the settlement agreement in her case, which Andrea spoke about earlier. Then we have Emma, Arishka, and Ariella, all Genesis plaintiffs from California, which spoke their truth, and they shared their stories and their feelings about an important hearing in their case during a live streamed press conference on Facebook. We also have Grace, a held plaintiff from Montana, and she is lending her voice in classrooms and conferences and videos on social media, really educating folks about her case and encouraging them to continue supporting her and her fellow youth plaintiffs throughout this legal process. And these are just a few examples out of so many more. And I really, want you to know that we are always working to build and engage communities of practice with folks whose work intersects with our own. And that includes lawyers in other fields, includes, global communities of practice, pediatricians, folks in healthcare, and so many more to really strategize on our shared goals. This year alone, our team and our young plaintiffs spoke at more than 100 events around the world. We've advocated in front of lawyers, in front of celebrities, in front of students, professionals in different fields. And guess what? Our efforts have been recognized with incredible awards and recognitions. And, amid all of this, we have you, our community of supporters, and we greatly value you, spending this time with us now and all that you do throughout the year. It does not go unnoticed. And we also, we also just want to hear from you. And when we're working with attorneys and experts and youth and creating our content, we're really thinking of you and how we can continue to build community power together, whether it's in person or online. And I really can't stress enough that none of this would be possible without you and the incredible 100+ organizations that have partnered with us. I'm going to name a few. There's so many, but here's just a few. We have ACE, 0 Hour, People versus Fossil Fuels, Moms Clean Air Force, Elders Climate Action, Fridays for Future, and Third Act. And like I said, there's many more. We're truly grateful because these organizations have really shown up in person for court hearings, for rallies across the country and online, really supporting our cases and supporting our youth plaintiffs consistently. There's another important piece of our work that I really want to share with y'all, and that's being a trauma-informed care organization. So our young plaintiffs, as you know, are grappling with climate impacts that most adults never experienced at their age, and it has serious effects on their mental health. And what we've seen over the years is the profound impact that our trauma-informed care has on these young people. And a really great example of this is Olivia, who is a held plaintiff in Montana, and she is on the Gen Z advisory board of the Climate Mental Health Network. And she is building community and providing burnout prevention and self-care to fellow Gen Zers. And that's truly incredible because she's not just coping, she is turning it into something positive by helping to create a safe space for other young people like herself. And that is just a really beautiful thing. But again, I want to say that none of this will be possible without your support and without your generosity. And I'm going to share a couple of stats that I think are important for you to know. So last year, over 2,400 donors made more than 5,600 gifts for a total of $4.8 million. So whether you give monthly through our Sustainer program or you've responded to a call or an email, your support has made a huge impact. And in 2025, we are going to continue raising awareness and fostering public support, to really advance the recognition of fundamental climate rights. And I'm just so excited about this. I think that our entire team is really pumped up and ready, to hit the ground running in 2025. So thank you all again so much. I'm going to pass it over to Matt and Julia.
Thanks, Eileen, and thank you all for being here today. We're going to get to questions in a second, but I want to take a moment to just say that it is no exaggeration to say that all of you in this room, this virtual room, makes possible what we do every day. You're the foundation of this work, and as we look to 2025, we need you by our side more than we ever have. At our Children's Trust, we provide legal representation and holistic support at no cost to the courageous young plaintiffs and their families. And really, that's because we believe that no family should have to shoulder this burden. They're standing up for all of us. But here's the truth. Our work is unlike most nonprofits. We don't receive financial aid from the cases that we file. We don't receive government grants or large institutional funding. Instead, 90% of our donors give less than $500. What does that mean? That means every donation at every level helps. These contributions power the resilience and the youth that we represent, and they really make the victories that we had in Montana and Hawaii possible. You've heard others say it, but I'm going to say it again. This work is not easy and it's not cheap. To help fund our future, we're actively fundraising to secure a goal of $2 million before our year end on December 31st. We're asking you all to dig deep. We're looking for leadership and legacy gifts from people like you who really understand the vital importance of lifting up our youth's human rights, their fundamental climate rights at this super historic, super important moment in history. We're asking you for your support, not just as donors, but as ambassadors for this movement. Your dollars fund the fight for fundamental climate rights that are untouchable by any politician or short-term agenda. That's why we're doing this fight in the courts. Together, we can make the right to a safe climate future politician-proof. This work is nonpartisan and it unites people across divides. I saw someone in the chat talking about Republicans who think that climate is fundamental. That's right. Our plaintiffs come from all walks of life, from the youngest among us to those who are already leaders in their communities. And our supporters, they span, I guess I should say we span 50 states and 113 countries. Together, we're building something truly extraordinary. And here's the reality. We can't do it without you. I'm going to say it again. We can't do it without you. Some people think that because of our global impact and the flashy cases we put on that we're well funded and have large cash reserves, but we don't. We're small, we're mighty, and we're dedicated to excellence. To take on more cases, to roll out the state plan, to enforce our federal strategy, and to elevate the voices of youth in providing deep trauma-informed care, we need elevated levels of support. We need your help. Every dollar you give is impactful. It goes directly to supporting this moment, empowering youth, and protecting our planet. And we know that the people in this room can do more than just give. You can amplify this call for support, share our work with your networks, and participate in our peer-to-peer campaign. Help us connect with your family. Help us share our vision for a livable planet and help us join on offense, not just on defense. Now is the time to push forward. It's the time to be bold. And together we believe we can build youth power. Together we can fund the future, not just for our children, but for all of us. This is legacy work. This is what we are leaving our kids and our planet. So I'm going to just open it up to folks. Oh, I'm sorry. I know that the donate link is going to be put into the chat. Please click on that and donate. And I'm going to open it up to questions with the remaining time that we have. So I think the first question that came in was about Republicans who believe climate change is real, who are like seeing it as the number one issue. Yeah, I think that's right. We like as we said, and I heard you heard from Julia, and folks will just tell you this is really a nonpartisan issue. It always should have been. And while, there has been some success for folks to make this into a political issue, moneyed interests. We're seeing that tide turn, and that's really important. I think that it is incredibly important to emphasize that, and that was a question that came from Steve Held, who is the father of Ricky Held, the lead plaintiff in our Montana case. Steve, it's the work that you did. You're changing the future by raising a powerful woman like Ricky, who is willing to stand up to her government, and she is leaving a legacy that is a better planet for our future generations. I think, like I saw with the marriage equality movement, this is about having conversations, sometimes challenging conversations with our neighbors and our communities about how climate change impacts us all. That's why our communications work is so important and why we need to keep developing resources for educators, families, therapists, et cetera. And that's all critical work that we are doing at our Children's Trust. So if you care about any of that, your support would be really helpful. The next question, I'm going to let Kelly Matheson answer this question. But the next question comes from a supporter who is asking us about the work that we're doing on the ICJ advisory opinion, if any. And while I think I know the answer, I want to let you answer that.
Sure. And there's some links actually that are in the chat. So the ICJ process is challenging in the fact that they're literally only allowing states through the door. So that's in some ways having the fox guard the hen house, right? But there are a number of NGOs that used a loophole in the process to submit amicus briefs to get what we thought before the court, and we were one of those. And next week begins the 2 weeks of hearings from December 2nd to December 13th in The Hague with the states. And there's going to be a big People's Assembly the first week. I mentioned in the link, one of our youth plaintiffs from the La Rose is one of the organizers behind that. And they're going to have a number of ways to support that. We're going to be supporting them both substantively, because we've already been providing expert testimony, the best available science to the young people. And then we're also going to be supporting them on the communications front. So we're going to dig in as much as we possibly can because that opinion matters.
Thanks, Kelly. And I'm going to oh, I'm sorry, Julie. Do you want to add in something?
Well, I was just going to answer the question really quickly that I saw someone put in about the Shell case that was decided in the Netherlands, since we're on the global front right now. So we have long worked with Roger Cox, who developed that case and litigated it. And he and I have been in touch since I founded our Children's Trust, and he's been really inspired by our work over the years and vice versa. So I'm going to be speaking with him about how to move forward from that decision. But what Roger would tell all of you is that, yes, there are a ton of silver linings. He is already thinking about a strategy moving forward, and it parallels with some new work that we're thinking about doing too. So that cross collaboration is vital. And Roger's an amazing litigator.
Thanks. And you read my mind, Julia, because that was the next question. So someone else asked about our media coverage and like whether, how has it been in the past? Has it been helpful? What goals do we have for 2025 with Hawaii amplifying our message through media? So, I mean, we have seen I mean, it's to call it like a avalanche or a tsunami of media coverage. I think that would be appropriate. We have just seen the world pay attention to these young plaintiffs as they take the stand either at trial, during oral arguments, or depositions. People really care. They're seeing these cases and the impacts that they have, and so the media is covering them, and we think it's incredibly helpful. Why? Because our cases, win or lose, are a vehicle for change because they start the conversation that's necessary for a narrative shift around climate change by centering those that are most impacted, children. So we're going to continue to try and work with media. And I don't know, Eileen, if there's anything you want to add from the communications front about what you're seeing on social media, et cetera. But yeah, I think we're very happy with how our cases are being covered.
Yeah, just an incredible outpour of support. And just to add to the media, like it is so important, to have our youth plaintiffs really, doing these interviews and sharing their stories with the media, because this is not just, in the US, this is around the world. And I just always go back to that New York Times piece on the front, the front page of news in the New York Times when the Held decision came in, and it was just incredible. And it's pieces like that that just like really help us continue to move forward. And on social media, it's just incredible to see how many people, are constantly supporting us and resharing. And, I'll share toolkits on there when a decision is happening or there's like a development in a case. And it is so helpful that you all are supporting our work and really resharing our content. So thank you all.
And the last question that I've seen is something that is near and dear to, I think, many of our hearts, right? Which is donating the only way that elders can contribute? Are there ways that people over 65 can help our children's trust? I just want to start by saying that donating is a powerful way to support us. Sharing our message is another. But we are going into 2025 and beyond, prioritizing building intergenerational bridges of support for young people. Young people need to hear from their elders. So that's why we invite people like Third Act, Rocking Chair Rebellion, to our court hearings, to our event in front of the White House. I'd encourage you to go and look at the pictures of these incredible elders in their rocking chairs supporting the youth. Showing up for young people again and again and again and again and again is what matters. We heard Genesis Butler say to us in this incredibly powerful way. This is a young woman who's the lead plaintiff in our Genesis case, who was just nominated by Ebony magazine as the top 100 Black Americans. That what she has seen in the past is that adults might come by and say, good work, we're so proud of you. And and her message to adults is, don't be proud of me, show up for me, show up consistently, be there when we need it, and support the organizations that are making a difference. So don't take it from me, take it from Genesis Butler, who you should all follow on Instagram, by the way, Genesis Butler _ um, we are just getting to the end of our time here. And I just want to wrap it up by saying thank you. I know didn't get to every single question, but I just want to say a deep, heartfelt thank you to our supporters. I've said it a million times, but we couldn't do it without you. And yeah, I hope that you have a wonderful end of your year. And please go check out our donate site and all of the work that we're making available through our website for free. So thank you so much for attending, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much, everyone.